So welcome everybody to the Online Ready webinar series. I'm Kristen Fonicero from the University of Michigan School of Information, and along with Project Director Dr. Lucy Santos Green of the University of South Carolina and Dr. Melissa P. Johnston of the University of West Georgia, I'm delighted to welcome you to the first of 3 webinars which launch our 3-year project Online Ready. So if you remember March 2020 and how our world as teachers just turned upside down overnight, many of us leapt into what we thought was going to be a real short-term MacGyver approach to online education. But really what we ended up was in a big well of what's been called emergency remote teaching. And credit goes to Lucy Santos Green for thinking of Online Ready and envisioning it as a way to think about how we can improve our online teaching abilities for whenever the next emergency comes along. And not only to up our online pedagogy, but to think about how we do that in a more culturally responsive way, how we welcome more types of learners into our space and create that broader welcome mat for all. And tonight launches the first activity for this 3-year project, which is made possible in part by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And that's where you come in. So we have a session this week, one next week, and one the following Monday. And in those sessions, we've asked some of our advisory council members to share their stories about how they have found they can help flourish online, how they can help flourish in diverse communities, and how they can be more responsive to the needs of folks around them. And we are looking for your input as well, because we are going to be designing a summer of professional development, and we want to see your perspectives, the tools, the strategies, the challenges, the mindset that informed your own pandemic experience. So we are going to record this session, and we will anonymize your feedback throughout. We're going to ask your opinion lots of times so that we can get a strong sense of what it is that you need in professional development like that. And we're going to use it to design some summer professional development in 2022 and again in 2023. And I'll be back at the end of the session to tell you about the call for applications for that summer pilot cohort of professional development. Also, I know some of you need to track your hours of professional development, and our project manager, Liz Hartnett, will be in touch a day or two after this live event with certificates for those attending tonight's session live. So tonight you're going to hear about cultural competence and online K-12 environment from a rural perspective, as Amanda Jones, an award-winning 5th and 6th grade librarian from Denham Springs, Louisiana, talks us through her journey. I'll let her do a more formal introduction momentarily, but my favorite way to think about Amanda is in the quote of a parent from School Library Journal, that during the pandemic, Amanda, quote, knew what we needed before we needed it. So with that, I will turn it over to Amanda, and keep those questions coming in the chat. Thanks, guys.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Kristen. I'm going to attempt to put the slide deck into the chat. That should be it, allegedly. So we are going to be talking about culturally, that's the one word I get tongue-tied on every single time, responsive school librarianship in a virtual world. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a 5th and 6th grade teacher librarian in Watson, which is, we don't even really have a mailing address. So we are technically in Denham Springs. I live in a very, very rural community with 2, some argue 3 red lights. And every child in my community goes through my school. We have 3 elementary feeder schools. They come through my school for 5th and 6th grade. They go to the junior high for 7th and 8th grade, and then they go on to the high school. So I will actually teach every child in my community. We are very rural. We're large majority white students, low socioeconomic status. So that's just a little bit about the background. I've been at my school 21 years. I went to this middle school, Live Oak Middle School. I went to it as a middle school student. I am now working with people who taught me, people that I have taught that are now teachers. And we really are like a family at my school. So if you need to contact me, my information's on here. Librarianjones.com is my website, and that has all of my contact information. So just to get started, I know when rewind back to March 2020, we had maybe 2 hours notice that the governor in Louisiana was about to shut down the school building. And we're like, oh, we'll be shut down for 2 weeks. And then obviously after a few days, we figured, I don't think it's going to be just 2 weeks. And so I know that I felt very unprepared. So we would like to take a poll. We would like to launch a poll and ask how you felt when March 2020 happened. So if you don't mind, let us know, like, how prepared were you? Very prepared, somewhat not prepared? And as you're filling that out, I'm going to tell you, I was so unprepared, it's not even funny. We are not a Google school. I had never used Google Classroom. I had never used Google Slides, I don't believe, anything like that. And I was kind of lost for about a day or two. It only took about a day or two to kick me in gear and figure out what I was going to do. And that included learning a lot of online platforms and things I'm going to talk about. But like I said, I was so not prepared. Nobody at my school was. I don't feel like anybody in my state was prepared. So I'm looking at the poll. A few people said very prepared, a lot of not prepared or somewhat. And you know, if you were very prepared, I just wish I had been very prepared. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I did. And then we're also going to talk about what it means to be a culturally responsive school librarian and how those two intersect. So let's see. I'm trying to move this poll out of the way. Okay, got it. So I have a Jamboard. And so what I would like you to do, and I'm going to copy the link, and I'm going to post it into the chat. If you would not mind using Jamboard, there's a little sticky note feature on the side. You can do a sticky note and tell me, what is your idea? What does it mean to you to be culturally responsive librarian or culturally responsive librarianship as a whole? What does that mean to you? So I'm going to give you a few minutes, if you do not mind, to go to this Jamboard and post a little sticky note. And tell me what you think, because the term culturally responsive, that was a new term to me as well when the school buildings closed down, and we went to completely virtual for a while there. Then we went to a hybrid. Of course, now we are back full time in my school. So someone posted, sensitive and aware of the diversity of student cultures, populations, and beliefs. I'm just going to give a few minutes for everyone to just go ahead and, if you would like to, please drop a little sticky note there. And I don't want to say what I think it is until everybody's posted theirs. Knowing who your students are, what their community is like, doing what is best for the community, being aware of the cultures in the community, as well as what cultures my students should be more aware of. Where are the needs of the community, being cognizant of issues facing our diverse populations within our schools, being aware of different ways that students might connect with online lessons based on their own ways of thinking and or who they come from. Yes, definitely. Being respectful of the cultures, being aware, let's see. Good. So as y'all are continuing to post these, I'm going to go back to the slide deck. Having guiding principles, yes, that honor all parts of our students' lives and culture. All parts. Yes, exactly. So as you're continuing to post those, I think of culturally responsive teaching. I found out that it's research-based on why we do this. So it's very intentional. When you're a culturally responsive school librarian, you're going to be very intentional in the way you do things to honor your students' beliefs. Like some of you said, they're different cultures, meet them where they're at, what they know, and then teach them other cultures. Culturally responsive teaching should be woven into everything. You can't just have culturally responsive lessons and your collection doesn't reflect that, or vice versa. You need to make sure that as a culturally responsive librarian, you're making sure your learning is relevant for every single student. Make sure you're connecting the cultures, the languages, and their life experiences, connecting with them with their life experiences, and then teaching them about others' life experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about how I did that when the pandemic hit. So March 13th was the day our schools closed. The buildings closed. We didn't close. The buildings closed, and we went home. And there was all sorts of information. I'm a huge Twitter fan, and I was on Twitter, and everybody was talking online about what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And people were throwing out a lot of resources. And one of the resources that caught my attention was, and I want to say Christina Holzweiss posted this article on Twitter, and it was about taking virtual trips. And I clicked, it was an article, and I clicked on it, and it was like 12 different places you could go online where you could view things in virtual reality or in a 360-degree way. And I started clicking on that. Now, my students are 5th and 6th grade. And yes, they are very technologically advanced. They probably circles around me, but there was a lot of information to sift through. So that I knew they could look at these sites technically, but I didn't know that they could understand what they were looking at. So I thought, well, maybe I will host a virtual trip. Maybe I will host something and I will explain it to them as we look at the link. So then I thought, well, I had never heard of Zoom. I think I used it like once maybe, but I didn't know how I was going to do this. So I started researching, and okay, well, I knew the first place I wanted to go to on our virtual trip was somewhere I had been personally, because I felt like I was a little more confident in what I was talking about. So the first place we went to was the Palace of Versailles in Paris. And I figured out Zoom pretty quickly. We closed, school buildings closed March 13th, and on March 17th, I believe we had our very first virtual trip. And what I did at the very beginning was that I would host them live on our school library's Facebook, because I had a pretty good following. My community follows me on Facebook, or not me personally, our school library's Facebook. I don't let them on my personal Facebook, but they follow our school library Facebook. So I knew I wanted to keep my programming going while we were virtual, and I knew that they would pay attention to what was happening on Facebook. So we launched our first trip, and I called it Journey with Jones, just because it sounded catchy. And I actually borrowed a beret from a family, one of my students. I borrowed a beret. I figured out how to use Zoom and how to do virtual backgrounds. And I went back up to school and grabbed my green screen, and we started. And so what I do is in these trips, let me see on the next slide. Let me go back. What I do on these trips is I stream live, and I'm hosting. And as I'm talking, I have a slide deck, and we click on different links, and we'll go different places. I use things like Google Arts and Culture, Google Earth, 360cities.net, and we'll look at 360-degree videos. The first one I did, the Palace of Versailles. It was Palace of Versailles. They already had everything on a website, so I really didn't have to do much. I did break it down room by room, gave a little history about what was happening in the different, but we had several families join us, and I did 2 or 3 virtual trips from March to May, 2 or 3 a week from March to May. And I would ask the kids, where do you want me to go next? And they would tell me, and that's where we would go. And we just kind of did it for fun. So at the very beginning, that's what we did, just for fun, just to give them, I thought, if my kids can't get out to see the world, we're all in our homes, I can bring the world to them. And the way this connects with culturally responsive teaching is that my students, a lot of my students, their families can't afford to travel. A lot of my students have not left our state. A lot of them have not left our parish. We have parishes, not counties. A lot of them have not even left our parish. So I thought, well, this is an excellent opportunity to showcase things outside of Louisiana, outside of the United States. Just for fun. And I'm going to talk to you about the evolution and how we later connected it to the standards. But as I was going through these trips, we did talk about the different cultures and language and things like that. Now, is there anything, if you do not mind, if you would like to share in the chat box, if you could, please share in the chat box some examples of programs or tools that you were able to implement as you moved your library program online into virtual learning. So what were some of the things that you did? And it may be something you did at the beginning or something, let's see. Yeah, let's talk about the beginning. Things that happened right at the beginning where we went from, and I'm not sure your background, but we didn't do anything virtually. So what were you able to implement? And you can post that right in the chat box. Flipgrid, yes. And I was thankful. I didn't know how to use Flipgrid. I did know how to use that. I was very thankful because I had watched a lot of Christina Holzweiss's Flipgrid tutorials. So I did know how to use Flipgrid, and I did use Flipgrid to do book talks with the kids, and they could leave comments and they could make their own book talks. That was a godsend. Flipgrid was online book clubs. Yes, Loom to create instructional videos. And that was the first time I had learned about platforms like Loom and Screencastify was when this all took place. Featured links to authors reading their works. Yes, a lot of authors were very generous, especially they're still generous, but right at the beginning, they were doing story read alouds. A lot of the publishing companies were giving permissions to read their stories, and certain companies had different parameters, whether you could stream them live or record, or how long you could leave them online, offering tech support for learners and families. I found that to be very helpful because just like I did not know how to use Google Classroom or anything like that, neither did our teachers, neither did our parents and our students. So doing little tutorials on how to use that. Friday book club, BrainPop. We did have, I didn't think about using BrainPop. We have a BrainPop subscription, and I never thought about that. That's actually, I don't know why I didn't think about that. That's a pretty good idea. Pebble Go, Big Universe, Epic Books. Epic Books, there was a big surge I saw in people using Epic during especially the very beginning of the pandemic. Morning meetings with students in Zoom. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat. I have trouble reading and talking at the same time. All right, highlighting resources, the authors. Yeah, those of you who were in districts that already had Google Classroom, I'm so envious of you because I did not know how to use it. And they all look to me. They all look to me on how to use it. And I don't know why, because I didn't know how to use it either. But I saw a lot of librarians stepping up and doing those tutorials, creating virtual libraries, showing how they have access to ebooks. I'm seeing a lot of that. Hobbies and crafts online. Hotspots. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Hotspots. And that was a big thing. I'm in a rural community. And so a lot of our students don't have internet. We don't get it out here, especially way out in the country. We get it more towards around our school area. So we scrambled on how to find the kids' hotspots and the technology, computers. Now I knew that as I started doing my virtual trips, I knew that the kids, a lot of our students, now they're 5th and 6th grade, maybe they didn't have phones, even though a lot of them have phones, but their parents did. And I knew they used Facebook. So I knew that they could watch online if I live streamed. And so going back to Journey with Jones, you can see on the screen, I'm a little extra. So I wear hats and things like that. I just thought it was fun. So I would wear hats and I would have different backgrounds and have different props. But everywhere that I went, I wanted to make sure that I was being culturally responsive teaching practices. I didn't feel like, now in Brazil, they do, it's Mardi Gras here. I'm trying to remember, what's it called in Brazil? We're huge Mardi Gras here. And y'all, ever since I had COVID, things go blank. So if you know what it's called in Brazil, not Mardi Gras.
Lucy says it's Carnival.
Yes, thank you. Carnival. So that's actually Carnival. That is not a Native American indigenous headdress, even though I should probably take that picture down because that's what it looks like now that I'm looking at this picture. But it was Carnival, and we were talking about that and how I had that because we do Mardi Gras here. But I was very cognizant of the other cultures and places. Kids would ask me sometimes, like, why are you not wearing certain headdresses and things when we went to like Israel? I'm like, and I would get to explain, it's just not appropriate. And we talked about that. We got to talk during these virtual trips. We got to talk about the cultures, the food, the languages, the different religions, the architecture, the art, everything that made that country different from our country or our state, but also how things were similar. Like I mentioned in Brazil with the Mardi Gras and the Carnival, we talked about that, how it was very similar. And I just sort of would do 2 or 3 trips a week. And you can see on the screen here, this would be an example of something in Google Earth that I would show them. Street View, I would show them, and then I would point out all the different features as we're talking, and I would give them historical facts. So we did that pretty much from March to May. Actually, I did them over the summer as well, but I stopped doing 2 or 3 a week because it was very time consuming. So I would do like one every few weeks over the summer based on, what they wanted to do. Journey with Jones series evolved so that when school started back, it went from something that we were just all doing for fun, and I would have families watch it. It was really cute because the families would send me pictures. They would watch it together as a family, and they would send me pictures of them. We did it around dinner time. Some of them, I even had a family that the mom would, wherever we went, she would cook a traditional meal for the kids, and they would eat that traditional meal while they were watching. And that just touched my heart, that these kids were learning all of this while I was doing these virtual tours. But we eventually went to where we were doing them just for fun to standards-based. So once school started back in August, I went back, we started in a hybrid, and I went to the teachers and I said, how can I take these trips that we were doing just for fun when everyone was stuck at home, we were starting to go hybrid in Louisiana, how can we connect that to standards? So I met with science and social studies, and we started doing the trips directly. Instead of broadcasting live, I would record or do live, depending on what the teachers wanted, with their students. And we would, if they were they were talking about Mesopotamia, we would do a trip we would journey to Mesopotamia. Then other librarians started asking me about the tours. And actually, I have a friend named Sarah Sansbury in Georgia who asked me, she said, I want to try these, but I'm really nervous and I don't really know what to do. Can we do one together? So we started doing joint Journey with Jones and Safari with Sansbury. And we were connecting her 5th grade science classes with my 5th grade science classes. And we were doing plant and animal cells. We would journey inside those. Eventually it evolved to the public library asking me for a partnership. So for the public libraries, it was Tales and Tales reading theme this past summer. I did a 10-minute virtual trip with a different branch of our public library every Friday. And we would go to a different animal habitat for their Tales and Tales theme. So it evolved into something that started just for fun as a way to keep my library program alive and well while we were all, while the buildings were closed, into something that actually is a collaborative effort with teachers from my school, other states, and collaborative with the public library. And throughout all of these, we make sure we're touching on, like when we're doing the different animal habitats, we talked about where these animals are found and the cultures and the geography and things that were happening in those countries. So next question I have for you to answer in the chat, please share in the chat box some examples of online instruction you provided in the virtual learning environment to support student learning specifically. So examples of some type of online instruction you provided specifically for students virtually in that online environment, that online virtual environment. And if you could just drop that in the chat. My mom taught kindergarten. She's retired now, but she always says, give them wait time. Amanda, give them wait time. So I'm giving you wait time. So if you would like to drop in the chat some examples of online instruction that you specifically provided during virtual learning to support student learning. You learned that from your mom too. Wait time. What's funny though is that my mom doesn't always do wait time when she's talking to me. So SAT prep lessons for, yes. Oh, good. SAT prep. I wondered if our high school was doing that. I usually don't now that my child is at our high school, I know a little bit more what our high school is doing, but I usually, I was focused on middle school, Pear Deck and Nearpod, college and career exploration, Google Meets with American Lit for database instruction. Yeah. Information literacy via Zoom. Our junior high did a lot of tutorials and instruction on Zoom, and she didn't have to, but she would say, hey, I'm going to be on Zoom at this time for Open Library if you would like to talk about how to do some research, or she could set that up with the teachers at her school and teach, drop in on their Zoom chats. Students read materials submitted on Google Docs, submitted the reflections, created slides. Oh, I lived in LA during the riots in 92, did instruction via Nearpod. Yes. Online family tree and iSearch exploration. research tutorials per teacher requests. All right. Julie said she's been preparing. We have school librarians. I say that I wasn't prepared, but I mean, really, I think in the back of my head, we kind of have, well, I might not have known the tools to use, but I was prepared on how to find them and how to implement them. Pre-recorded Google Slides on Noodle Tools, Newsela. Do y'all say Newsela, Newsela? I don't know how you say that, but I say Newsela. I think that's my ELA background. Students writing a weekly newspaper by submitting something that was important to them. I've heard of some kids that they were calling them zines. And I saw some of those in Salt Lake City at ASL this past week, where students make their own little zines based on a topic, or they were using Google Slides, in this case, virtually, to write something. So these are all wonderful examples that I kind of wish we had this in March. I wouldn't have known what to talk about then, but I could have gotten ideas from everybody. But I was using, the definitive News ELA versus News Ella. Oh, I'm gonna have to go back and read that, Kristen. But eventually, I was doing the Journey with Jones 2 or 3 trips per week. And I thought, this is great and it's fun. And the whole community, not the whole community, but a lot of people in the community are watching, and this is great, but I need to step it up because it can't just be just these virtual trips. So we started doing weekly author chats, and the authors were very, very, freely giving of their time, because they couldn't go in person anymore. And so right at the very start, and at the end of March, early April, I contacted about 7 or 8 authors and said, hey, this looks like it's going to be a while. Do you mind meeting me in a Zoom, and we live stream it to my school library's Facebook page, and we do kind of an author chat? Every single one of them said yes. And then I say, well, how much, what is your fee? What would you like? Every single one of them did it for free. Rita Williams Garcia, Alan Gratz, Lamar Giles, Rebecca Petrick, Jake Burt, so many, and they all did it for free. And people keep asking me, well, how did you get it all for free? Well, I think it's just because I jump started right at the very beginning before everybody else started asking. And I was like, I can send you, we have a little bit of funding, and not all of them. No, do not send me anything. I will chat for 20 minutes. And we would do these 20-minute chats. And what you can see on this slide right here at the very bottom, and I do have permission to show these, I have media releases and parent permissions. You can see this is the author, Jake Burt. And then this is me. And then I would invite an ELA teacher to the group, and I would invite 2 to 3 students, and we would just chat. And it was 2 or 3 students. I would put out a call on social media, and I would say, hey, has anybody read any of author Jake Burt's books? If you have, we're doing an author chat next week. Please email me. I will take all the names, draw them from a hat, and those students get to be in the author chat. And so I would draw names, and then I would email them back and say, you have been chosen, and they would get to be in the Zoom. And they loved getting to talk to the authors. The authors loved getting to interact with students because they couldn't do in-person author visits. And at the time, the authors also, they didn't really know how to do virtual tours at virtual visits at the time. I mean, I'm sure some did and some didn't, varying degrees. But every week we had a different author, and it was amazing to connect with those authors and have their teacher in the room. It was great. Then we moved on to, I have a good friend of mine, Heather White, who was an elementary teacher in my district, not one of my feeder schools, but in another school in the same district. And she said, hey, let's do a digital escape room with the kids. And I said, okay, because she taught 5th grade and we had 5th grade at my school. So we, I think the first one we did was like maybe Harry Potter or something, or Star Wars. And you can see here, we're extra. So she was, I think, let's see, I was Chewbacca and she was Darth Vader. And we advertised it. We made these little promos, and we said, hey, if you would like to participate in a digital escape with us, just email us. And once she and I had verified that they were using a student email, we would give them the Zoom link. And we also set it up where they couldn't Zoom bomb. So we had a waiting room, because we did have some attempted Zoom bombers. They had to put their first and last name, and then they had to put their teacher's name and what school. And we didn't have any issues. We didn't let anybody in the waiting room that we did not know and that we had not verified. And we did digital escapes. And what she and I would do is we would post a digital escape room online. And in the Zoom chat, because we would turn off the sound because, 30 kids all talking at once, that was 30 kids all talking all at once would just be totally ridiculous. So we turned off their sound and we made them chat. Diane, hey, Diane, I just saw you in the chat. Y'all, Diane, School Librarian of the Year, 2021, School Library Draw. I went off script there, but I just wanted to say hey to Diane. I saw her in the chat. But we did these breakout rooms, and we would lead them, and the kids would argue in the chat, like, no, it's this answer. No, it's this answer. And we'd say, okay, let's try this. And sometimes they lasted 15 minutes because the kids could solve them like this. And one of them went 45 minutes, and finally said, we were like, this is taking forever. let's just end this now. Let's hurry up and wrap this up. But they had a great time, and we would do one a week. And the cool thing about these is that it was students at Heather's school, her fifth graders, and students at my school, my fifth and sixth graders. But eventually we would have students from, I think at one time we had students from 7 different schools in our district. And we did put a limit. You had to be 4th through 8th grade. We just didn't want any high schoolers in there with our elementary students. So we didn't really have anybody requesting that anyway. We had other librarians from public libraries sitting in and learning how to do it so they could go back and do it. And eventually Heather and I did some webinars on how to create your own and host your own online digital escapes. But it was a great way. We also would talk about different cultures and different things. Sometimes they were made up cultures, like the Shire. And this one we did right here was one of my 6th graders, Elliot. We called him Sir Elliot of the Shire. He actually created, the kids started learning how to do digital escapes, and we did Elliot's one week. So we did his Lord of the Rings escape one time. So another thing we started doing was providing resources. And I know all the school librarians were providing resources. And I love this little meme right here. And I saw it in a Future Ready group. And it said, if I can just curate all the Learn at Home resources, the world will be saved. And I felt like that's what librarians were trying to do. And my good friend Tiffany Whitehead said, Amanda, you need to slow it down a notch because you're putting so many resources out there. You're putting too many. It might be information overload for your parents. I said, that's why you're my mentor, Tiffany. And so I had to tone it down a notch. But we started, some of the things I started doing is a lot of what you have mentioned in the chat with flip grids and slide decks and tutorials. And I did that for the parents. I did that for the teachers. What I did want to show my parent resources. And let's see, that's our Jamboard. Let's go resources for parents. Here we go, if it'll load. So I started a Wakelet, and I love using Wakelet to curate resources for parents. So something that I did for the parents, we had, because the parents were just as lost, I found, as I was. And a lot of them were not very techie. So I showed them, I put everything in one place for them. I put all of our social media, our websites, who they needed to email to be put on our weekly email list. I talked about our website, how to get access PowerSchool, all the faculty and staff emails. We even did an orientation tour the next school year, because normally we have like an open house orientation and they couldn't. So I put together an orientation video. That's my administrator right there. And I made a little video to welcome the kids to school, but I had everything that the parents could access all in one spot. Google Classroom, cheat sheets, things like that, tutorials. So I did that for our parents. I also have my library website, and on my website, I have the student resources, I have the teacher resources, and all of these are just Wakelet boards where I have curated, and my internet is a little bit slow right now, so I might actually close these links and not show you those links, only because my internet is dragging a little bit. But I would have all of these resources ready for the parents, the teachers, and the students, and during this time to help them. The biggest thing, anything I would find, I would post, but my biggest one, I went viral with this little thing. I just posted it on my Facebook, and it got shared like 500,000 times, which is really weird. But what I did put, I use Wakelet a lot. So, and I use my school library's website a lot to disseminate information. So I've put webinars. I've done webinars on both down here. If you're ever interested and you don't know about Wakelet, or you would like to learn how to build your own website, I have webinar links down here if you would like to learn that. So now it's another time to share. So please share in the chat box some challenges you experienced, challenges when trying to connect with the school community in the virtual environment. So what were some of the challenges you faced in connecting with students, teachers, and parents? Or you can pick one. Because I find that it's a different stakeholder. So the way you gear things differently depending on your stakeholder. Lack of internet at home, that was huge. That was anything I could do over something that was friendly, like Facebook, that they were already on, that their parents were on. A large portion didn't have access. And when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching practices, you can't teach them virtually if they don't have the technology and they don't have the Wi-Fi and the internet connections. It's been a year and a half, so obviously we should be better with having the technology. I know with all of the grants that have been going out, a lot of schools now are able to put the technology in the hands of students and get those kids those hotspots. But yeah, I'm seeing in chat, I think everybody was overwhelmed. Lack of consistent internet. It's hard to effectively, like Christy said, we struggle to effectively communicate with our multilingual families. Lots of things weren't available in multiple languages. And something that we did, my friend Heather and I, we actually, we learned how to use, and now I'm blanking out on it. It's the reader. It's that program that reads aloud in different languages. So we were teaching teachers how to use the different language, like in Flipgrid, you can use different languages. You can interpret and transcribe those and use the captioning features and things like that. So we were trying to teach the teachers how to use that to effectively communicate with their bilingual parents and with their hearing impaired parents. Balance of screen time is hard. Different group sizes and formats is hard. Immersive reader. Thank you, Alice. We were teaching the teachers and the students and the parents how to use immersive reader to read things. To change the languages. And I don't know any other languages, so I don't know how well that it translates. But I had several parents that speak Spanish wrote me, and from what I can tell from using immersive reader and Google Translate, they liked it. So, but it's so hard, Yes, and Google, we have right now, it does keep getting better and better though. What started out as very hard, a lot of these problems, we've learned how to overcome them. And some of us learned very quickly, and then some of us, it took a little longer. I picked up some things quickly, some things I'm still needing help on, making sure my practices are appropriate and translating well and being equitable to all of my students and parents and meeting them where they're at and meeting their needs. Ebooks and digital resources. I know a lot of us, we're showing our students how to use the ebooks and the digital resources. And my school cannot afford ebooks. Like, we just can't afford it. We don't have a budget. So what we did was we had already partnered beforehand, about a year before. We had partnered with our public library, and every student has a student e-card. Every single student in our entire district is automatically assigned from the minute they enroll in our district, a student e-card, and it travels with them until they graduate high school. And actually, one of my friends, her son graduated 2 years ago, and he still uses his. So I think they still work. I don't know how long they are going to work. But we partnered with the public library. So I would do these little tutorials and show the kids how to use their student e-cards and how to access Flipster and Cloud Library and all the databases. And I have never used open ebooks. I'm not quite sure what that, I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it's about. Basically though, because our public library, when those students get those e-cards, it's millions and millions of books, graphic novels, music, movies, comic books. So pretty much anything they could want, my public library has it. The only problem we had was making sure the kids had the internet and the technology to access it. So I didn't have to worry about purchasing ebooks, but not everybody has a public library system like mine that you can do that. But I am seeing that since this has happened a lot more, I'm hearing stories of more libraries, public libraries partnering with their school librarians to make sure they have these sources. I would also host chats on Facebook Live with our public librarians, and they would talk about the different resources that the kids could use. I'm not going to play that video. So did you have an opportunity to create tutorials to help students and staff? And if so, please share some of the examples of the tutorials that you did specifically. Nate, if you could in the chat, give specific list of tutorials that you use to help students and staff. Like, was there something they struggled with? I know a lot of my teachers wanted to use Flipgrid, and I knew how to use Flipgrid, so I was able to make some tutorials for them. Navigating databases. And Christy said public library partnerships saved us. Yeah, they really did. I call our public library often and thank them for all of their help. And we've actually built a pretty solid partnership that we already had a partnership, but I think the pandemic has made it 100 times stronger, that collaboration and partnership that we have. Tutorials on how to use Sora, Flipgrid, breakout rooms in Zoom, how to use different apps, how to access Google Classroom. And I would use Screencastify and Loom, use those different platforms, how to use ClassTag, ReadWorks, Nearpod, Flipgrid, Edpuzzle, how to check, because we've always had PowerSchool, not always, but like for 10 years, we've had PowerSchool. I guess I took for granted that all the parents were using PowerSchool. And then when the school buildings closed, I realized they weren't. They needed tutorials on how to use that to check their kids' grades, because a lot of, the kids were turning in their Google assignments and they weren't really, and the parents wanted to see what the grades were. How to do the online school registration process. Yes. What to do when Zoom wants you to update but doesn't tell you and it just starts acting. I think I need that tutorial. Databases, getting their digital public library cards, using Destiny Discover. Oh, how could I have forgotten that? Using Destiny Discover, clearing cache, resetting browsers. And I feel that school librarians really stepped up to the plate in teaching our students, meeting them where they were at, finding what they needed and meeting their needs as best as we could. And someone, I think it was maybe Joyce or someone said in the chat, is we are getting better. The pandemic did change the way we do our reading programs at my school. And I'm not going to use the name of the company, but I don't like, there's a leveled reading program where you read books and take tests. And I just don't really like it. I absolutely hate it. And it was a way for me to get rid of it because our school board would not let the kids take those tests at home. And so I was like, oh, yes, now they can read and not have to take a test on what they're reading. So it changed some of our reading programs. We still did our battle of the books. We had to go virtual. So you can see the slide right here. We'd had to go virtual. This was actually when we were back. We were back in school, but we couldn't all meet at one time. So we were doing virtual. I started showing the kids how to do book talks. They would use Flipgrid or they could make their own book talk on Google Slides. They loved doing that. I had so many students do book talks on Flipgrids, and I had it set up where they could only view if they had a school email address, and they would watch each other's and they would comment and they would read the book and then they go, thank you for recommending this. Or someone would go back in, I don't know why you recommended this. This is not a good book. And so, but it was really cute to see them interacting like that while they were at home. And it wasn't just the kids that would typically volunteer in the library either. It was some of the kids who I had not typically seen talk about books in the library. Another thing, we had a lot of social unrest during the summer of 2020. And I really wanted to address that. And I love Cicely Lewis and her Read Woke campaign. And she's older students than I am. And I looked at her books and I thought, okay, well, my kids are like 9 and 10 and 11. So I can't really do, and she's changed a little bit since it, but at the time it's like, I can't do the same books as Cicely because my kids are a little younger. So at the same time, I also read an article called Mesh, which was talking about, we focus on STEM in school libraries or in classrooms, but what about MESH? And I had never heard of MESH, and it stands for Media Literacy, Ethics, Sociology, and History. And so I read this article and I thought, well, we could do a reading challenge that is very similar to, I give her the credit, like this is where I got the idea from Cicely Lewis, but I call it the MESH Society. And I took books for kids that are my students' age. And they have a reading challenge where they have to read one book from each category. So they have to read one of the media literacy books, one of the books in the ethics category, and this is this year's. We had a different set last year, but this is sociology, and this is history. And if you go to my school library's website, I do have the article from which I based where I heard the term mesh. I have the article in there and why we are doing this. But the students, instead of having a computerized program that they have to take a test on, what they do is they read one book from each category and they have to submit a Flipgrid telling me what they learned. And they learn a lot from this challenge. They learn, I try to incorporate as many different perspectives as I can. We've got, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but we've got poverty and benefits of being an octopus. We've got a child that's overweight. I've got historical, the Navajo code talkers, Pablo Cortayas, Marcus Vega doesn't speak Spanish, understanding news, social media propaganda. And so they have to reach. So instead of focusing on how many blank points can we get this semester, which I hate, we moved on to here's a challenge where we can read something, we can talk about what we learned. And so that's how I made our reading program more culturally responsive during the pandemic. So in the chat box, tell me what challenges you experienced when you were trying to promote literacy. So as we're all at home, we're all stuck at home, we're not going anywhere, we're having to meet our students virtually. Some don't have internet, some do. It's just all a hot mess. What challenges did you experience when you were trying to promote literacy and provide instruction in that virtual environment? Was there anything specific that you can think of off the top of your head for specifically promoting literacy and providing instruction in that virtual environment? And some of y'all have said some of the things earlier. I didn't know if you wanted to add to that in the chat. And I'm going to give wait time. Technology cooperating. Technology never cooperates for me. If I'm doing a webinar, it's either the technology or my neighbor's not cooperating, and they're loud. They're cooperating right now. So. Administrators cancel my sessions with MD students. Some students don't have access to books. We use Epic, but it was only available during school hours. That's interesting. So our students, your school purchased a bunch of books and parents could come pick them up. Yes. And Amy Herman in Michigan would post about her curbside checkout, which she had 4 schools. So she, I don't know if you know, Amy Herman does the School Librarians United podcast, but she would post about that. And I'm going to move on because I have a few more slides before I have to wrap it up. So I want to get a few things in before I turn it back over to Kristen. But I really love how librarians stepped up to the plate they stepped up to bat during this time. I know that there were a ton of librarians and other educators that were providing little webinars. This is the one I did. This is my friend Heather, and we would do little webinars called Our 2 Cents, why we love Flipgrid, or why we love Immersive Reader, or why we love, whatever it was we loved that week. And the librarians in Louisiana, when we started to go back to school in August, we had no idea what it was going to look like. A lot of us were still virtual, some were hybrid. It was all over the place in Louisiana, depending on where you were at, whether you're a public or parochial school, what kind of were you going to be allowed to check out books? We didn't know. We got no guidance whatsoever in Louisiana, none from anyone. And I really hope my leaders aren't watching this to hear me say they didn't give me guidance, but they didn't. And so we put myself and Lovey Howell, who is the president of Louisiana Association of Librarians, and Tiffany Whitehead, we actually did a webinar or a live program called Navigating School Library Programming. And we told them, here's a few ideas, but what are your ideas? And we had, I want to say 60 librarians joined that, and we were all sharing ideas back and forth. So I learned so much from them, and that webinar is still up. It actually, there's the bit.ly link. You can actually go back and watch it. Steve Tatro wrote a Knowledge Quest blog about it. But I feel like we all came together to help each other and to help each other help our students and our community and our teachers, because that was our end goal, was to help our culturally responsive, help meet all the needs of all the different learners, all the different styles of learning, all the different types of learning, no matter what their background, and meet them where they were. And so I think librarians did a really good job on that. So final thoughts. Now we have another Jamboard, and it's actually the same one, but I'm going to slip to the second slide. I would love you to share your biggest takeaway that you had, positive or negative, from the virtual learning experience of the last year and a half. So on this Jamboard, and I'll drop the, Kristen dropped it down in there. Okay, so the Jamboard link is in the chat. And if you would go on there and take a sticky note and drop it on there, what was your biggest takeaway, positive or negative, from the virtual learning experience of the last year and a half? And while you are putting yours, I will share mine, although I'll give a little wait time. What is your biggest takeaway, positive or negative, from the virtual learning experience? My biggest takeaway was I learned just how inequitable the technology, the internet, all of that is in my community. You've heard the expression, the haves and the have-nots, and it was very glaringly obvious, the haves and the have-nots. Somebody put that right as I said it. Inequities were glaringly obvious, and we had so much work to do, and we still have so much work to do. I'd like to think that we've come a long way in the past year and a half. Flexibility, for sure, flexibility. And I'm not the world's most flexible person, so I had to learn to be flexible. Try. Failure is sometimes inevitable, but we learn from our failures. How true is that? Because I had some definite failures along the way when I was doing my virtual series. And if I had given up, I don't want to think about if I had given up, but try. And if something doesn't work out, there's always someone that can help you. Be prepared to pivot, reevaluate, modify. We can translate our service to meet the students where they are. Students are highly capable and can be really creative with technology. I think my biggest takeaway, though, was how glaringly obvious it was, the haves and the have-nots. But I also think positive, on the positive side, the takeaway that I had was that librarians are leaders. We are leaders, and people turn to us to help them with these tutorials and all the resources. And I think we stepped up to the plate. So pat yourself on the back, because I think we did a good job there as far as that goes in the pandemic. And we're still stepping up to the plate. The things I learn every day on Twitter are just amazing. So those are my final thoughts. That's all I had to say about it. And so if you have any questions you can put them in the chat, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen.
All right. So while you're thinking of questions, I want to thank you, Amanda, for showing us how much joy and enthusiasm, how far it went during some really dark times. And I think that inspires all of us to get up tomorrow morning with a little more pep in our step. Before we go for the night, we want to remind you all that we are recruiting. This is a 3-year research project to look at how can we better prepare our school librarians for the next potential shutdown. So there is a certificate being designed that you can get in 6 weeks, fully online, where we will discuss how to improve your cultural competence, your awareness of your community, your online pedagogical skills. It's all online. We're looking for 15 participants from across a diverse round of folks. So geographical diversity, socioeconomic diversity, language, ability, and more. And you'll get 6 weeks of instruction, and then team members will support you in the fall with implementation as well, all while we hear more about what makes some of our instruction better or less useful for you. You will get CEUs and an $800 stipend for participating in the summer and with your fall implementation. There are only 15 spots available. So we ask that you apply by January 1st. And I will put the link for that in the chat, and also the link where you can register for next Monday's session and the Monday after that. as we continue this early conversation in our project about culturally competent K-12 librarianship online. Okay, guys, hit Amanda with your questions.
And while we're waiting on questions, I will say that I am actually very nervous about next Monday's webinar, because I do want to share my experiences when we start talking about culturally responsive teaching when you live in a small rural town that is not very diverse. So I'm getting a little nervous about that. So y'all come and give me some support, please. And don't be too harsh on me. And we're going to be, I'm joined with Erica Long, a good friend of mine. And also, while we're waiting on questions, I wanted to say that culturally responsive librarianship, something that I noticed was because of, the way things are right now with the pandemic and everything. And Jane Lofton, who is in this group, did an excellent job with providing the hashtag not at ASL with the live binders and providing all those links. So she stepped up to the plate for the librarians who could not attend AASL and provide all those, the tweets, the Instagrams, all of that, the information. So she did that for her peers as well. Not only for, do we do it for our students and our teachers and our community, but we do it for our peers as well.
Okay, and it looks like that I saw one question in the comments. Joyce wondered if you had played with reading progress yet. I don't know that I've actually heard of that. Is that like an app or a program? I don't know. Or maybe I call it something different and I do and I don't know. Let's see if we get.
It's new. No, I'm writing it down though, because if Joyce says I need to try it out, I definitely need to try it out. Reading progress. I have not heard about that. So Joyce, do you want to, can you drop in the chat and just tell reading progress allows you to monitor students like Dibbles. Oh, independently. Okay. I'm definitely going to look into that, Joyce. Thank you for mentioning that.
Oh, and it's in Microsoft Teams. Interesting. Oh, see Joyce's post.
Gotcha.
I'll look it up for everybody.
Will do. See Joyce's post. I'm writing that down. All right. Well, if anybody else has any question, doesn't have any other questions, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Kristen, is there anything else?
Nope. I will just say that we will be in touch with you about how to access the archived section. But if you want faster access to things, down in the chat window, there's those 3 dots and you can click Save Chat so you get access to those links and those ideas right away. And I'll post Joyce's link in there. So thank you so much, Amanda. This is a boost of positivity. Thank you to all of you who attended today, and we hope we'll see many of you next week.
Bye, everybody.